Hey everyone. Uh, Hi everyone, my name is Elliot Treichel. If you don't know me, I'm an assistant professor of English and writing here at Eastern Oregon University. I'm also the faculty advisor for Oregon East. Um, I really appreciate y'all coming and deciding to spend some of your evening with us. This is my first event that I've sort of done at Eastern Oregon University, so I'm pretty excited and nervous. But we had a great evening for you. Tonight we're going to celebrate the most recent edition of Oregon East, and that is this one right here. If you don't know, Oregon East is EOU's student-run literary journal. So we're going to celebrate the release of it, hear from some students whose work appears in this edition, and then maybe take a short intermission, and then we're going to have an open mic reading for just students here who want to share some of their poetry and prose and fiction, but whose work maybe has not appeared in this issue. Before I get too far, I want to thank a few people who helped put this together, including Candace Watkins and the rest of the library faculty and staff, whose names just sort of left my head, but they did this wonderful display of like all of the issues of Oregon East, and I'll talk a little bit about the history. It's pretty fascinating. At the back table, there's copies of Oregon East that are available for you all to take, so there's some back issues as well as this current issue. I want to thank Simon Johnson, who will be one of our readers tonight, but is also now one of the editors on the journal. The AV folks for setting up the audio and the live stream, and the student fee committee as well. I also have to acknowledge Nick Neely, who is totally rad. And did a lot to get this issue put together. So without him, this journal wouldn't have come together. And then lastly, a shout out to Megan Phillips, who was our managing editor last year. And a shout out to all the students who are currently part of Oregon East. Oregon East has a long history at EOU, and it's a great example, I think, of Eastern's commitment to experiential applied learning. The issue that we put out next year will mark the 75th anniversary of Oregon East. It is one of, if not the longest running literary journal in Oregon. And in a world where journals come and go, that is a pretty remarkable accomplishment. If you look at this display here, there's actually a version of the journal that predates Oregon East that came out in 1933. Then the journal started as the Middle R. It changed names to the Underpass, and then at some point in its history became Oregon East. Over the course of its history, Oregon East has published the likes of William Stafford, Ursula K. Le Guin, Bill Kittredge, and Carolyn Kaiser. I was looking through one of the other issues, and there's an interview in there with Sherman Alexie as well. And then, of course, we've published scores and scores of talented students who've gone on to have very successful careers in writing and teaching and the arts. So please grab a copy of the journal, enjoy some refreshments. And then, like I said, once our initial group of students read, we'll take a short break and then do some open mic stuff. All right, with all that said, I'm actually going to kick off the reading part. One of the very cool things about this issue is that there is an interview with the poet and essayist Kim Stafford, which was conducted by Amy Conway, a former student in our MFA program. For some context, if you need it, Kim Stafford is the son of the National Book Award-winning poet William Stafford, one of the great American poets, in my opinion. Kim is a former poet laureate of Oregon. He's published dozens of books. He is also one of the founders of Fish Trap And he has just been an incredible writing instructor and mentor to many, many people in the Pacific Northwest and across the country. I'm just going to read the first 2 pages or so of the interview. And as I was looking back at it today, Kim's words just kind of struck me as being very fitting for our current moment here in America, but I think also on campus, and some of the conversations that are swirling around us. I don't know, it's a little weird to maybe read an interview, but I'm going to start with the interviewer's question and then move on to what Kim has to say. So this is from Amy. We first met sometime around 2012 when you came to my MFA program to lead a writing workshop. We made a big circle with our desks, and you led prompt-based writing exercises. After a few rounds of writing, folks opted to share their writing or pass. I was extremely nervous, but felt like I really needed to share what I wrote. The prompt I responded to was about a song with your name in it. I wrote about how I had lamented to my dad that there was no song with my name in it. He corrected me and started to sing Amy by Pure Prairie League, saying that he used to sing it to me when I was a baby. I found myself soon after singing that song to my son, changing the name to his as I danced him to sleep. I could barely get through it, breaking into tears, but I remember looking up and seeing you listening so intently, so presently. It made an impression that stayed with me. You treated every person and their words like they were the most important, inspiring thing you'd ever heard. And then last summer, I joined your week-long workshop at Fish Trap, and again, you sat enraptured by every person's words. And this long story and then short story leads to my first question. When and where and how did this relationship to words start for you? Have you always been fascinated with language or story? Do you remember the first time a sentence or word stopped you in your tracks? Kim, I would have a hard time distinguishing my sense of being struck dumb by how words convey the invisible straight to the heart, from how I can be arrested by some glory in the sky or the miracle of birdsong or witnessing an act of sudden kindness. When in the flow of the ordinary, in the muted film of daily life, some expression from the unseen reveals itself, I become a kind of feral, hungry hunter, staring, feeling. I want to know that, catch that, live like that. When we were kids, talking at the dinner table, sometimes our father would say, "Let's talk recklessly." This was our signal to drop the polite stuff and dig down, try things out, utter what he called thought experiments. One thing our parents did that had a big impact on me was writing down things we said from the time we were just starting to talk. They made a little book of these sayings they called Lost Words and gave each of us a copy. I ought to call them lost words because by being written down, they were not lost. One time my brother asked, would anything ever be so beautiful that robbers wouldn't tear it down? Big philosophical question. Or my little sister, a story just goes along, but a poem has to pound and pound. And it is recorded that at age 4 I asked, what do you do if your teeth catch on fire? The way they honored what we said taught us to honor what we heard, what we thought, and eventually what we wrote. This led in my writing life to the idea of the writer as a professional eavesdropper, a fervent listener. I eventually wrote a book called The Muses Among Us, Eloquent Listening, and Other Pleasures of the Writer's Craft. So now, as a writer and as a teacher, my craft is rooted in deep listening to the work of my fellow writers, to the world around me, and especially to the long muted voices inside me. Amy, that sounds extraordinary, magical even, to be invited to talk recklessly. I feel like so many people I know are working to just talk confidently or loud enough to be heard. What was your path to becoming a writer and teacher? When did you first writing down your otherwise lost words? Kim. Like most, I started writing in school, sometimes grudgingly, sometimes in a fever if a topic took hold of me. Then in high school, I had an English teacher who inspired me to keep a journal, feed off of the beauty of the earth, and testify on the page. I still have that journal and her fervent, encouraging words in red pen. And here Kim shares a little poem, and I'll just end with this. The poem is titled, Her Name Was Scholastica, but She Went by Scully. In green taffeta, our teacher stood petite on her toes in a trance, eyes blazing, spittle trembling at her lips, reciting Whitman's spells and psalms, Emily's enigmas, hewn meditations of Thoreau, as she gazed long and steady, each of us caught in her searchlight of love. Then she whispered, take out your journal and write a fire in your soul that both hurts and feeds you honey. Thus, she buried me in rapture, alone with my flames, scribbling in fury my thorns, my wilderness of fear and desire. Now, 50 years beyond her whispered sermons to my heart, that tattered notebook wears a halo, an aura no one else can see, my secrets scrawled, heaped, spilling forth ragged in code. And in the margin, as a bird might write with tiny red pen, her words. Some would divide life into youth and adulthood. Do not divide yourself. You will still be who you are 50 years hence. Don't ever let yourself be lost. And that's the start of the interview. It goes on and is really incredible. So again, thanks all for coming. I'm going to introduce our first reader, who is Simon Johnson. Give it up for Simon.
Okay. Hello, everyone. Really glad you all could make it tonight. Yeah, and thank you to the library. This looks amazing, and the setup is perfect. So I'm going to read a couple of things. First, this poem. It's called Big Empty River, and Professor here, James Stolen, actually really helped to refine this. So, thank you. Yeah, this is Big Empty River. I'm fishing for steelhead, and there's nothing. The river is coming up, the red rocks and the pyrite and the gravel, everything disappearing into turbidity and empty space. Others can escape the world while fishing, just focus on the river, make 45-degree casts downstream, but I can't. I can't concentrate on the steelhead. I can't face the emptiness. I keep casting my fly, making it swing through the perfect space for a steelhead, and I try to find a meditation in that act. I try to find a quiet, but I find nothing, and that space is empty. Still, I have to keep fishing and hope I dredge something up out of the river. Hope I remember that there is no room for hate or anger in life, and that only a few things truly matter. But there's nothing, not right now, and I'm still waiting for that bite, still waiting to fill that space. Okay, and then this is kind of a almost pseudo-fictional short story that I wrote almost exactly a year ago after I was in the hospital for a few days. It's just called Hospital. I'll read the first couple paragraphs. Quiet save the moaning of the quiescent ill, and those precious interludes where there is no pain and so there is nothing tangible, still there's the din of machine tones. Robotic and cold, inhuman, but it means nothing to be human here. The dignity and expectations inherent to humanity are stripped away and strangled in the thin threads of blue gowns and the metallic grasp of wires. In place of the man, there is a monster, sickly and decaying in the very fibers of its flesh, spliced into the silicon organs of carnal sensors, patiently awaiting the night in sweet hibernation. But things are strange here. In the latest hours of the night, there is no sleep, and time ceases to bear its authority. Perhaps time once carried its own jurisdiction, But there are chemists now, and it is us who control time, and the confines of this hospital room it passes by, altered and deranged. Perhaps there is some world beyond this room, but for now it is an illusion. The chatter of nurses and the beat of footsteps is merely a suggestion of something further. The only thing is to lay still and to listen for a figure approaching the door, wait for a breach in that feeble boundary between this microcosmic reality and the outer implied one. And when they come, those incontrovertible acolytes of the institution, they bear with them pills and machines and instruments, the gifts of some charming daemon, seeds of ruby pomegranate and chalices of poison, the subversion of glistening needles, sterile and sharp, come to feast upon blood warm and fresh as would a chupacabra lashing at its prey. It is untold what cryptids name this place their home. Are there many of them lurking in the twilight reality of these pale halls? Or have they all been exorcised, hunted out and bore down upon with spears and hounds in the violent facade of the night? But the room is quiet still, and these pantomime effusions of despair fade into the darkness. Thank you. Thank you. And then I would like to introduce Delilah, who is another editor on this year's edition of the journal and would like to talk about some of her photography.
Hi, I'm Delilah. I am an editor on Oregon East. I'm currently in the MFA program here at EOU. And while Oregon East is mostly known for its poetry and writing and essays, as you can probably tell through looking at the various issues, the visual arts are not forgotten or any less important. Something that I believe is really important about photography is that you can learn a lot about writing from photography and vice versa. One of the things that Elliot actually taught us in one of his classes is that writers notice what they notice. And I think it is the exact same for photographers. The pieces that I have within the journal are approached through this idea of noticing what you notice and intentionality within the space around you. The piece Rural American Graffiti comes from my love of graffiti. It is a time-honored tradition that we can find examples of in historical sites and, of course, the modern day. So whenever I find interesting, untouched areas, I try to think of what does this space really mean to everyone who's written here. The piece Men, Women was created for the rodeo history course taught by Tracy Hanshew, and that is a self-portrait of myself at a rodeo grounds at the only time in which myself, a queer person living in a rural area, can feel comfortable being there, which is to say, I maybe did a tiny bit of trespassing. My piece, Let Go, came from that mentality of noticing what you notice. I was on a trip, I saw a statue, I had a camera, I said, how can I make an interesting image? I didn't think much of it later because it took ages to get it developed, but then I just fell in love with the image. And the image Run Free is kind of similarly, sometimes you walk along and you see the sky and it is beautiful and blue and it's silhouetting something and you just got to take a picture. I think that photography has in a lot of ways improved my writing, and hopefully in next year's edition a little bit of my writing will be in there, but I really recommend looking at not just my art but all of the visual art in this edition because I think it's really good. I don't remember who goes next. Abby, you're next.
All right. Is this okay? All right. Well, I'm Abby. I wrote this poem in a class last year, Intro to Poetry. So it's like the first time I ever wrote poetry. and it was supposed to be a poem of witness, and I was inspired by a wildfire that raged through my hometown in 2015 that took a lot of homes and a lot of land, and it was really devastating for our community. But I also wrote it because climate crisis is something that I'm becoming really passionate about, and I kind of wanted to use this poem to be a voice for the fear and the frustration that that conversation can cause. So yeah, this is Charred. Everywhere, red. Greedy crimson tongues lick the horizon. Stretched to the sickly sky, they crave more. More. Have they not had their fill? Our treasured terra firma, plundered and pillaged and stripped. Isn't it enough? Destruction breeds despair. It swells, wafts, feeds as the undergrowth does the red. My home, my haven, now my hell, eclipsed by selfish embers, mercenaries of nature, that thieving inferno cares not that it ruins all but memories. All that I know, now smoke and ash, ghosts, tales, echoes, quivering lips, dry and cracked as the high desert land. Will they too catch a spark, ignite? Thank you. I think Luna's next. Gosh.
Hi, I'm Luna. This poem is actually part of a collection of 5 poems, all similar in theme. So I have 6 siblings younger than me, and so this poem and the rest of the collection, which I might read later at the open mic I'm still on the fence about, are all kind of about an experience being the eldest sibling and how that experience, particularly with sisterhood, kind of affects you and shapes who you are and how you conduct yourself, especially in relationship to your siblings. It's pretty short, and it actually didn't have a title before Elliot was like, you need a title, otherwise we can't publish it. So old title was number 3. New title is Sissy Fit. Sisters are blessings, imitations of sincere flattery, adorned in hand-me-down dressings, victims of adolescent battery. Sisters are also parrots, saying whatever you said, pretending to have the same merits, forgetting the words took root in your head. Eldest translates to mother, of kids I didn't even have, of kids who often smother what little individuality I had. Loving is like losing, a part of me I never knew, a constant reminder of bruising, my ego, purple and blue. Sisters are supposed to be blessings. This I know for certain, which is why after introspective pressings, I feel so guilty for thinking them a burden. Thank you.
This is titled Hardtack. Rations, as stated by the Dungeons & Dragons Player's Handbook, include nuts, jerky, dried fruit, and hardtack. What is hardtack? I asked. I sat with him alone again as we waited for the rest of our friends to arrive for the game. It's very dense, he explained, sort of like a biscuit, is how it sounds. Hardtack. I'm curious, I said. I can make some for you. So I went to his house after the next week's game and took my place at the kitchen table, same spot by the window, legs crossed, arms stiff. I rested my hands on my lap, sometimes rubbing them against the denim of my pants when I thought of my surroundings. Picture frames lay by my side, one of the many excessive gifts he bought for me. The handle of the fridge across the small kitchen was gray with grime, and the house smelled strongly of cat, like vinegar. With a smile, he handed me a red-lidded Tupperware full of hardtack, stacked up inside like a batch of homemade lemon bars. What made hardtack good for long treks was its shelf life. Its ingredients might only include water, flour, and salt, so there was nothing in it easily perishable. It followed soldiers, sailors, and the pilgrims. It could last years without spoiling. I opened the container and took one of them to my mouth. My eyes squinted shut with the effort as I tried to pry a small piece from the block. Chalky in my throat, I couldn't swallow. I didn't know you were supposed to soak it in water first. It was many years later when I sat at my desk on video call with my therapist. Why hadn't you thrown them away? I think a part of me would feel bad if I did. There's effort and money in the artwork he made for me, and there are memories attached to them. But I admitted to her earlier that they lay stuffed in a folder on the bookshelf so they could stay out of my sight. I didn't know anymore which color the folder was, just that it was there, and that the original frames were on the closet's top shelf. I kept it until it grew mold. I tossed it out with the Tupperware.
That was Megan Phillips, everyone, managing editor of this issue. Thank you, Megan. I'm going to just conclude this part with a piece from an online student who asked if I would read for her. And then we'll take a very hard five and then move into open mic. This piece is called Dragonfly. It's by the student Jennifer Mixel. It was a sweltering day in summer when I met the dragonfly. It was not a damselfly, those tiny mini dragonflies that come out when the weather is warm. No, this was a large dragonfly, almost 4 inches long, with wings as clear as a freshly cleaned window and a body that was a mixture of blue and green iridescent hues that came together and were as shiny as an oil painting in a museum. The colors reminded me of the painting Starry Night by Van Gogh. The dragonfly had large black eyes that it used to take in its surroundings and spindly legs that contained great strength. Normally, I am terrified of insects, but living in the forest has taught me to be respectful of all creatures, even spiders. My apology to those of you who like the 8-legged beasties, but I have arachnophobia, so I think I have come a long way. You can imagine my shock and surprise when the dragonfly landed on my finger. When I was young, I was told that creatures will come to you if you remain silent and still, so I pushed myself out of my comfort zone and tried what was to me the unthinkable. As I stood on our old, worn-out deck, I took a moment to acknowledge my surroundings. It was about 98 degrees outside, even in the shade. There was the slightest of breezes, but not enough to cool you down. The air smelled of hot dirt and pine with a mixture of smoke from a distant wildfire. Our closest neighbors live about a half a football field's distance away, and they were trying in vain to water their rapidly drying front yard, so there was also a humid, hot water smell in the air. In the background, you could hear crickets, katydids, and the hum of dozens of bumblebees, all in search of the slightest relief from the blistering sun. After several moments, I held my finger out and stood as still as I could, and then it happened. A dragonfly. A real dragonfly landed on my right index finger and stayed there for what seemed like an eternity. The two of us lingered there, trying to understand each other. The entire world around us faded away, and we had an unspoken conversation that day. It was like we innately knew that we would not hurt each other, and we each had something to share. In some cultures, the dragonfly is a symbol of change. It reminds us to look at our lifestyles, habits, and beliefs, encouraging us to live our best lives. When the dragonfly came to me, there were things in my life that needed attention. And he was there to remind me that I needed to take some time for myself. Then, as quickly as it came, it flew away, continuing its journey. All right. Thanks, everyone, so much. Grab a copy of the journal, grab some snacks, and we'll be back with the open mic. while you're milling about and maybe psyching yourself up to do some open mic stuff, I do want to just remind you all that Oregon East is currently accepting submissions of poetry, fiction, nonfiction, and artwork. The deadline is February 25th, so if you are currently an EOU student, you are welcome to submit regardless of major or interest or style, fantasy, realism, literary fiction, whatever. Please consider submitting something to the journal, and you might get published. And then 75 years from now, when this thing is still going on, they'll look back in the journal and see your name. Oregon East is a student-run journal, and one of the ideas that they had was to kind of end the evening with an open mic and invite some other students up here to read for a little bit. So I'm going to turn it over to Simon and kind of let him orchestrate the open mic stuff and enjoy. All right, thanks, Simon.
All right. Hello, everyone again. Yeah, if you have any work you'd like to share, that would be awesome. I'm going to read some Czesław Miłosz, my favorite Polish poet, who taught at Berkeley for a long time. So he has ties both to kind of pre-World War II and post-World War II era Central Europe, as well as the Pacific Northwest. And he wrote this, well, kind of book called From the Rising of the Sun, and it's divided into 6 sections. And it's kind of, in my opinion, a poetic and literary masterpiece. But my favorite is called Diary of a Naturalist, and I'm gonna read a section from there that is somewhat pertinent to our home here in Oregon. My generation was lost, cities too, and nations, but all this a little later. Meanwhile, in the window, a swallow performs its rite of the second. That boy, does he already suspect that beauty is always elsewhere and always delusive? Now he sees his homeland, at the time of the second mowing, roads winding uphill and down, pine groves, lakes, an overcast sky with one slanting ray, and everywhere men with scythes and shirts of unbleached linen. And he sees the dark blue trousers that were common in the province. He sees what I see even now. Oh, but he was clever, attentive, as his things were instantly changed by memory. Riding in a cart, he looked back to retain as much as possible, which means he knew what was needed for some ultimate moment, when he would compose from fragments a world perfect at last. Everything would be fine if language did not deceive us by finding different names for the same thing in different times and places. The alpine shooting star, Dodecathon alpinum, grows in the mountain woods over Rogue River, which river in southern Oregon, owing to its rocky, hardly accessible banks, is a river of fishermen and hunters. The black bear and the cougar are still relatively common on these slopes. The plant was so named for its pink-purple flowers whose slanting tips point to the ground from under the petals, and resembles a star from the 19th century illustrations that falls, pulling along a thin sheaf of lines. The name was given to the river by French trappers when one of them stumbled into an Indian ambush. From that time on, they called it La Rivière de la Coquins, the River of Scoundrels, or Rogue in translation. I sat by its loud and foamy current, tossing in pebbles and thinking that the name of that flower in the Indian language will never be known, no more than the native name of their river. A word should be contained in every single thing, but it is not. So what then of my vocation? And then I know a couple people had some writing. Yeah, go ahead.
Good evening. My name is Jake DeLong. What I'm going to read is not a poem because I don't do poems very well. Instead, it's a short story that I wrote in my fiction class last term. The title is Ticket to Ride. The road stretched out before my car like a line drawn from my eye to the horizon. I knew this road. I had traveled it before. Today was no different, but there was only one problem. I didn't remember starting this trip today. My car, a beautiful Dodge Monaco 500, rolled off the line in 1970, and her lines were immaculate. She had personality and class. The only quirk was that she seemed to have a habit of changing the radio station to the classic rock station nearby, but as I loved hearing the old-time rock and roll, I preferred it anyway. The soft cream color was a bold stance, as all the other cars on my street were typical shades of blue, black, or white. When I sat behind her wheel, I felt at home. It was no longer just me against the world. I had Betsy. She and I traveled the back roads. Hearing her engine rumble echo off the canyons was more calming than any drug I had yet tried. The faint smell of aging leather and hot metal made the inside of Betsy smell better than homemade cookies, and I lived for the days I could just take her out on a new road. The long, tedious days of sitting at my desk and putting data from one spreadsheet to another felt like a dream state. The only time I felt really alive was when I cranked down Betsy's window and just explored with her. I took a lot of these trips, and I discovered more forgotten roads along the backcountry of Oregon than I think any map ever noted. If they had at one point, no one had traveled them for so long that they fell out of use. It was odd, though. Most of them were still paved. I loved smelling the slightly spicy scent of crushed pine needles under my tires, the way that Betsy's headlights only dimly lit the road ahead when the sun went down, and I loved her choice of music for these rides. It was like she was creating the soundtrack, and I did her the dubious honor of singing along, though her windows never showed any cracks, even when I hit those high notes. I could not ask for a better companion on these trips than her. The last thing I remember before this trip today, though, was walking home. I kept Betsy at home since my office was only a few blocks away and the area got worse the closer I got to work. I did not want to see somebody abuse her while I was sailing the doldrums of data entry, and sitting in my driveway gave her a chance to show off, even if the only ones who saw her were the neighborhood kids who had a basketball hoop in the street. When I got home, nearly every day I would hear, "Hey, mister, your car's really cool," with the sincerity of youth making the words sound like sweet music. Once in a while, a parent would be with them or simply walking past, and I would see the agreeing nod from them. Betsy was the most exciting thing that had happened to the neighborhood in at least 20 years. But I was walking home, and I can remember passing the alley behind the former hardware store. Its windows were covered in black plastic. They had blown in by a storm about 10 years ago, and nobody had either cared enough or had enough money to get them fixed. I tapped my pocket, checking for the pack of cigarettes I had given up 6 months ago, but the habit of checking still stuck with me. Before I quit, I would always stop at this alley to light up because the alley seemed to be a natural windbreak, allowing my lighter to catch the tip without wavering or going out. Instead of that, I got in the habit of simply checking to see if I had a pack, and the longing of the acrid taste of tobacco smoke struck me as it had for the last 6 months. Of course, there was no pack, only a lighter. I had long been known as a smoker. The premature lines on my face showed the habit as clearly as if I had a coffin nail hanging out of my mouth, and I often got asked if I had a light. When I tapped my pocket, though, I felt my lighter and pulled it out. This one was not the white lighter I had carried since I found it on a park bench a year ago. Instead, it was a green one. I paused, looking at it, trying to figure out how it came to be in my pocket when a trash truck barreled out of the alley. It nearly missed me, though the smell was not as bad as any other trash truck I had seen before. It was odd. It's like the driver seemed to lock eyes with me as he passed. Those eyes were not blue, green, or even brown. They were black, like staring into the depths of the midnight sky on a moonless night. Next thing I can recall, I'm on this road. Well, it must have been the shock that made me forget the rest of the walk home. I do remember that I was wanting to take a drive today anyway. I decided to lose myself in the roads. The slight imperfections of the road rumbling my seat, the loud engine taking my worries away. This was a long, straight road, and I knew that Betsy had enough gas. I made sure to stop at a gas station when I got back from each trip, just so I could hop in and go next time. Her dial rested on the F, engine temp right at center line, and even the clock was reading the right time. We were in cruising mode, she and I. A long road like this reminded me of the story of the old milkman and his horse. Both were blind and traveled there right by memory. The long stretch of road was flanked on both sides with tall pine trees, a veritable honor guard for the regal lady that took me all over. The sun was starting to fall towards the setting, but not quite staining the sky with colors. The few clouds above were light and fluffy, and not a storm in sight. This part of the road was notorious for terrible radio reception, and before I could pop the radio off, the distinctive 6/8 timing and the arpeggio of the song House of the Rising Sun by the Animals began playing. I knew it should not have, as the closest station's footprint was too far to make the sound any clearer, but the sound played loud and strong. The haunting quality of it gave me an unseasonable shiver, not touched by the heat from outside. I've always had a slight superstition about this particular song, thinking it was the harbinger of something weird to come, but I tried to shake that off. What could be so wrong when I had Betsy? And I'm going to go ahead and stop right there. Thank you guys so much for your time.
Did you miss me? Oh, that's loud. I'm going to be reading 2 short poems that I wrote in my first poetry class in the master's program. This first one is called Offerings. I had no hope when I readied myself for rainy streets and shattered dreams, no promise that I again would see what sights the world could hold. My broken marriage, your tarnished ring, fogged memory like a dark autumn day. It hurts to wish, to want, to pray, to be prepared to see another day. Day by week, by year, I'm consistent. Standing in the courtroom or an apartment across the way, I rarely changed. I saw you, who rarely stayed the same. I prefer things simple. You wash all that away with excitement, with care. You've given me life again, my partner. You talk a lot, I say little. I can offer only service. No fine watch, no fancy evening dine, just silver memories, golden days, between beaches, birthdays, and all my coming days. And this second poem is called Fear. I've taken my fears and forged them in anger. My tears act like hammers. I beat it into shape, tempered it in love, did my best not to use hate. My fear is a knife, sharp and bright. I turned my heart into leather, sewed it into a sheath. My heart's filled with fear. Compassion is in my bones. To use it, I had to dig deep. Compassion is the handle, shaped and sanded and sleek. I've taken my fears, my angers, my tears. I've taken love, taken my heart, took compassion, and now it's here. All I have is this knife. To make it took years. It can cut, it can dice, it can stab. It can chip and dull and shine and rust. How it's used defines itself. How it's defined defines me.
Hi, I'm Abel Naya. I'm a student here. Simon asked if I'd like to read, and so I crafted a story. Not nearly done. You guys are getting the first, freshest look. Very rough draft, and so, yeah, hope you guys enjoy. March 5th, 2000. Today's the day me and my family have been looking forward to for 8 months now, and I couldn't be more excited. My beautiful wife is pregnant with our first boy. I love my daughters deeply, all 4 of them, but I've been overran for years, and I need some cajones on my side. 3 of my daughters beat me there because I was finishing up a job. That's when I got the call that my wife was in labor. I had to bring in my trailer, and now parking is being a bitch. Come on, Jorge, your wife needs you, I think to myself. I pull through 2 parking spots, taking them up, and get down. I run as fast as I can to get to the hospital, dodging everyone in my way. I finally reach the desk with the 2 nurses. Hola, my wife is here and in labor. What room is she in? I tap my fingers frantically on the desk as the nurse gets her computer ready. What's her last name? Montañez, I reply, while she types and clicks away as my anxiety begins to skyrocket. Floor 3, room 144. The elevators are right there behind you. Gracias. I speed walk to the button and push it more than needed before a door opens to my left. When I get in and press floor 3, my phone begins to ring. When I get it out of my pocket, I see it's my oldest daughter, Blanca. Bueno, how's mom doing? I'm not there with her yet. What? She yells, deafening my ear. How could you not be with her? Calmate. I'm in the elevator going up right now. The door's open and I rush out trying to find the room. Okay, well, tell mom that I'm flying in and I should get there in the morning. Alrighty, I love you, mija. Be safe. I love you too, pa. Now go be with your wife. She hangs up the phone and a couple moments later, I get to room 144. I knock before entering and seeing the mother of my children in pain. Where have you been? Everyone in the room yells at me. I had to park with the trailer. My 2 younger daughters, Camila and Lupe, roll their eyes at me as I take over for my second oldest daughter, Maria, and hold my wife's hand. She gives me a bunch of shit for not being there sooner, but forgives me at the same time. She squeezes my hand so hard I want to pass out. Instead of saying anything, I remain silent and tough it out. This is her moment, and I'll do whatever she needs. To be honest, babe, I thought this would be easier, since you did it 4 other times. She lets out a pained laugh. How about we switch places and you tell me if it's easy? Oh, nah, I'll pass. We both chuckle a little bit, and then the doctor enters the room. Thank you, guys.
I would say that I was peer pressured, but really just like 3 people, and I feel like that doesn't count as enough peers, but I guess I will continue and I'll read the 4 other poems that belong to the collection. I'm so sorry. 1. The girl has my face, but she is not me. She stares at me with sad eyes, my sad eyes, but they do not blink when I tell them to blink, and they do not cry when I mourn. Her lips are mine, but they do not curl up when I am happy. They do not frown when I am displeased. How is it that she can have this face, these features so prominently mine, yet they do not reflect my feelings? How is it that when I look at her, I see myself reflected, yet there is no piece of glass in front of me? It is true that we come from the same blood, the same flesh, but that should not mean that we are identical, right? My sister's heart does not beat in rhythm with my own, and it is in that way that divides us, making us different people. So why do the similarities still haunt me? How can one come to terms with their own identity when it appears to have been stolen? 2. The moment she was born, my face was no longer my own. Strangers on sidewalks would beam, cookie-cutter children, just like their mommy. Does my face tell my story, or does it tell hers? Can you see the tear-stained pillows through my eyes, or the pleading cries from my mouth? Can you see the pain in my freckles, or the insecurities in my hair? Or do you just see the copy-paste kids with the same colored eyes, many times repeated, until we all grew up, looking the exact same? I read 3. 4. She will yell at me, and she will pick fights for no apparent reason. She will curse me and blame me, screaming that I am the worst thing that ever happened to her. And I will resent the fact that she is just like me. She likes the same things, blinks with the same capacity, and speaks with the same flourishes. And yet she will still gnarl her teeth with vicious anger at my very insulting insolence that I dare make the assumption, insinuation, connection between these similarities. But if, at the end of the day, she comes to me with her sad eyes welling with tears eerily similar to mine, curling up in my bed, begging for my comfort, pining for my warmth, I will tell her that everything will be okay. Because that is what I'm supposed to do. That is how it was meant to be. No amount of fighting, no matter how much sass, attitude, name-calling, can take away the simple fact that I am a protector. I am hers, forever and always my duty. 5. My gentle hand delicately plucks the flowers one by one. It is bittersweet to know that after months of picking the dirt beneath my fingernails and watering at dawn, admiring growth and pruning away shriveled leaves, my darlings must be guillotined. My gardening shears sever life, roots, bounty from aesthetic, scented beauty, which with each flower I think of them. A rose pricks me, and I laugh. The blood blooms across my tongue as I stick my finger in my mouth. So temperamental, I tisk. Daisies giggle in the wind, small and delicate in the palm of my hand. I remember when I used to hold her and braid them into her hair. My carnations dance, and I reminisce upon the way that frilly dress looked on her as she stood in the living room, smiling for pictures. The sunflowers loom over me, and I have never felt so small. I am reminded of the room I make whenever she is standing next to me. But when I get to the mums, something halts within my heart. I look at the compact petals and think about how my life has felt so full, how tight I've had to squeeze everything together, and I begin to cry. I've already killed my rose, my daisy, my carnation, my sunflower, so why, with shears in hand, can I not bring myself to kill my chrysanthemums, to kill myself? Pluck my petals and I will weep. Tear me from my roots and I will bleed. I look forlornly at my desecrated garden, my corpse bouquet hanging limply in my hands. As I turn around to leave, the mums sway softly in the breeze behind my back, and I do not cut them. Instead, I leave them to rot and go to find a vase for my flowers.
Thank you, everyone, for reading. That was excellent all around. Is there anyone else that would like to? Red? No. Megan? Okay. I've done enough coercing for this event, so I'm not going to force anyone to do more. If no one else wants to read... I have more things I could read if we want to read for the sake of reading. Sure. So I wrote this in mid-December because I've been on a bit of a winter poetry kick, and this is called The Snow in Winter. It is impossible to live, yet we do, realizing that there is no life except for in winter, no harvest besides the cold. The snow will fall and make you whole. Once, At a poetry reading during the darkness of February, the snow spat, dancing hard and sideways against the glow of windows and street lamps, inviting a new type of noise, denouncing the quietude of words. And in the mountains, where the earth bulges to silence, under snow fixed to avalanche and become imperfect as old ski tracks shatter the miracle of isolation, rebuking the myth of solitude in this impossible life. There is no forgiveness except in winter. The world will melt to the lilacs. If there is eternity, it is not the spring. If there is fixity, it is not this dance. I see Elliot approaching, so Luna, you should take your spot before he gets here.
I want to make space for people, but if no one else wants to read, I just want to thank you all for coming. Again, please grab a journal if you haven't. There's some old issues which you can also grab if you'd like. And then I appreciate Simon's peer pressuring tactics. So peer pressure your friends to submit to the journal. And yeah, thank you again to the library staff. I really appreciate it. All right. All right, ladies and gentlemen, sorry to set your expectations, but Megan's going to read one more. This is a rare treat. Megan came a long way to join us, so give it up for Megan, and then we'll conclude after that. Thanks, Megan.
Yeah. So this poem is not mine. It is by Henry Wadsworth Longfellow. I was going through my closet one day and I found this really old book. It's 115 years old, and this poem in it really stood out to me. St. Augustine, well hast thou said that of our vices we can frame a ladder, if we will but tread beneath our feet each deed of shame. All common things, each day's events, that with the hour begin and end, our pleasures and our discontents, are rounds by which we may ascend. The low desire, the base design, that makes others' virtues less, the revel of the ruddy wind in all occasions of excess, the longing for ignoble things, the strife for triumph more than truth, the hardening of the heart that brings irreverence for the dreams of youth, all thoughts of ill, all evil deeds that have their root in thoughts of ill, whatever hinders or impedes the action of the nobler will, all these must first be trampled down beneath our feet, if we would gain, in the bright fields of fair renown, the right of eminent domain. We have not wings, we cannot soar, but we have feet to scale and climb, by slow degrees, by more and more, the cloudy summits of our time. The mighty pyramids of stone that wedge like cleave the desert airs, when nearer seen and better known, are but gigantic flights of stairs. The distant mountains that uprear their solid bastions to the skies are crossed by pathways that appear as we to higher levels rise. The heights by great men reached and kept were not attained by sudden flight, but they, while their companions slept, were toiling upward in the night. Standing on what too long we bore, with shoulders bent and downcast eyes, we may discern, unseen before, a path to higher destinies, nor deem the irrevocable past as wholly wasted, wholly vain, if rising on its wrecks at last to something nobler we attain.